you doing, YouTube? Matt back. This guy, Matt. Third person? Right? I hate that. Why am I'm Matt Massive Beers. I always say that. Anyway, we're off to a smashing start. We're bringing it back with one of those, the Musings, the Massive Beer Musings that I started a couple weeks ago. I decided to kind of chronicle, kind of my journey through beer and just kind of ramble into a microphone about like how I got into beer and the things that kind of made me kind of, I don't know, ebb and flow into kind of doing this, rambling into a camera and just talking to the internets about beer and stuff like that. And the first one was really kind of my original journey, kind of getting into beer, which was really just kind of going to Canada was a kickoff. If you want to go back, watch back that first version of the Musings, it was me kind of just taking the trip to Canada and kind of falling in love with a specific beer, and that was Unibrew Maudit, and coming back and really taking a crash course on beer through my buddy Ian, and more specifically a bar called Elmer Suds, and really just kind of dipping my toe into the first foray, or at least the initial kind of hook of getting into craft beer. And if you didn't watch the first one, to kind of shorten it, is basically I just found something I found really tasty and was lucky enough to have an outlet and a bunch of really smart people who were educated about beer, and we're talking late 90s here, that I kind of got this kind of cool kind of like not even crash courses, like a mentorship in the beer, and from there, it just kind of grew. So when we finished the last conversation, it was me kind of just, going and drinking through all these various different styles of beer at a quintessentially fantastical beer bar. I said I was going to post some pictures of the beer menu from Elmer Suds. I haven't done that yet. I'll bring it up here. Maybe I'll put it up right here. I did that last time and I didn't put it up, so hopefully I remember to do it this time and show you the kind of beers I originally got into, and that kind of shaped the kind of tone and tenor of what I really, really did enjoy when it came to beer, which was honestly a lot of Belgian stuff, a lot of English stuff, and a lot of the old guard stuff you see today that a lot of people, I don't want to say look down on, but it's kind of shelf-turdy stuff that people, aren't a big fan of, whether it be the Sammy Smith Tatty Porters of the world, or the Chimets of the world, or the Rocheforts of the world, or, those kind of beers. La Trappe, they were a Koningshoven for a point there. That's how long ago they're still Koningshoven, but they're called La Trappe now, but tangent. Between like 1999 to like 2000 and something, I believe it was, like La Trappe couldn't use the word La Trappe, so that all their beers said Koningshoven instead of La Trappe on them, regardless. So it was basically me kind of diving into a lot of old world kind of beers like that, and I had a couple different partners in crime through that period. A big one was my buddy Wade. If you go back and look at my earlier reviews, he kind of pops in and out of them, and me and him kind of like dove headfirst together into a lot of different beers during that Elmer Suds time and outside of that, and we really hyper focused on Belgian beers, but more specifically we got really kind of fixated on aged beer. That's like, it's a weird thing to kind of jump into, but you have to understand back then, beer was the internet. There was no like beer forums. There probably were on the internet, but you're talking about 2000, 2001. The internet was kind of still ghetto back then. So while there was outlets online to find stuff like that, it was very few and far between. YouTube didn't exist. You know what I mean? Things like that. And we just really kind of focused on what we learned and drank through and really enjoyed when we kind of did our kind of journey through Suds. And then and kind of went out and just looked for random things that we could find. As I touched on in that previous video, few and far between, man. At that point, even if you went to a distributor, there's a lot of me rehashing the last video, but you go to a distributor, you ask for a case of whatever. Even Chimay at that point, it'd be like, we can't order that. We're not allowed to. That's what you would get from a distributor. So it was really just kind of looking around and trying to find not the next big thing like today. I shouldn't even say the next big thing, a tick. So let's talk about tick culture in that sense. Didn't exist back then, but the mindset of, I like this, I've had this from a brewery, let me go find something similar of this from somebody else. It's kind of the, the precursor to today's kind of tick culture, but there was no Untapped, there was no kind of like, beer menus, those kind of things going on. So it was kind of just very much like pound the pavement kind of stuff, and just go out and about and try to find these places that had random different beers that were like few and far between, but also kind of existed in little notches and little seams in little different places and stuff like that. So it's kind of expanding your horizons besides or outside of that one location that we used to go to, and just to try to find new beer. So going out into the world with that kind of mindset, with loving the Belgian, more specifically Belgian dark beers, English ales, barley wines, things of that ilk, and knowing those are the flavors you're trying to look for, sure, IPA existed, West Coast IPA existed, but, even if you got West Coast IPA, that was the big difference. Here on the East Coast, let's say we got it in a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. If we got it and it was less than 6 months old, that was super, super fresh for us. We weren't getting the beer the way it was supposed to be presented or consumed. And honestly, half the time we didn't like it. We would be like, this is just not good. I don't like this. I don't want people like it. Of course, because it sat in an unrefrigerated truck and spent like 3 months moving, 8 months in a distributor, and then 1 month on a shelf, and then we drink it and be like, well, why do people like this thing? We heard from people, this is fantastic. Well, time. And at this time on the East Coast, there really wasn't a ton of breweries. Sure, you had some breweries like Brooklyn, you had Allagash way up north, which we'll get to that in a minute, because that was a big find for me, and I'll kind of come back full circle in this conversation later down the line. And we had breweries here and there, but there wasn't a ton, So we go out there and we just try to find stuff that we would dig on, And it was weird, because it wasn't like you would go to a bottle shop. Didn't exist. It wouldn't be like, oh, we go to this beer distributor with all these crazy beers. There was one that existed. It was called Pikes Creek, a way up above Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. They had the craziest, thinking back now, they had the craziest beer in the world. But outside of that, there was no real distributors, especially when the pre-internet, pre-conversation, pre-kind of days you're kind of doing, like I said, trudging that pavement, hitting that pavement, going out there and trying to find new things. Very much reminiscent of me when I was a DJ and I used to do weird electronic music. I'd go to New York, I'd go to Bleecker Street, I'd go to Sonic Groove, Satellite Records, all those places, Kim's over there off of Square Park, and all the other record stores. And really, there was no MP3s, there was no online audio, really. You had to go and just listen to records, and go to places. It was very much the same thing with beer. And then we ended up finding just these really good hidden gems. And most of them were close to where I lived. At the time, I was living in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. Antonio's Pizza on River Street in Wilkes-Barre was a great one, man. That's why I was originally introduced to Allagash. Remember walking into that pizzeria, and it was a weird theme in Pennsylvania. A lot of these like little mom and pop pizzerias had really, really good beer. And go in there, and one day I walk in, and my buddy Wade, and we're like, what's this? Big 750, cork and cage, Allagash double, and Grand Cru. And we're like, Belgian beer, what is this, Maine? What are these people? Okay, let's get these. 750s, $5.99. $5.99 for 750. I'm not lying. And I'm like, we ripped those, we brought them home, and we drank them, and we're like, someone in the United States is making beer comparable to what we've had from these kind of English breweries. Maudit turned me on. It's from Canada, so obviously I've had stuff from outside of there, but it's very few and far between. Really fell in love with Allagash at that point. And you're talking now probably, I'm guessing 2001? 2000 to 2003, 4 or 5-ish. And really just started finding more and more breweries doing new things. Going to Antonio's Pizza and up in, like I said, in Wilkes-Barre. Going to Goldstein's Deli in Kingston in Pennsylvania. Going to Sabatini's Pizza, which now is a crazy beer place. But back then it was a little pizzeria joint with a huge crazy cellar of all these fantastical beers. All these, a lot of aged barley wines, English ales, Thomas Hardy's, J.W. Lee's I was introduced there. No, that was at Suds, but a lot of these other different breweries that I really got into, some Lost Abbey, started getting stuff from them, and started getting some stuff from, or not just from there, but from every place. It's a lot of United States breweries, North Coast. I think we were getting Deschutes back then, and it went away and it came back, I believe. But a lot of these kind of seminal class of '89 kind of breweries that started to glow up in the United States that really either made West Coast jams or made like old school beer, whether it be porter or Belgian style stuff that they were influenced by, and really just kind of growing and tasting and finding new flavors from breweries and stuff like that. At a time when even breweries in Pennsylvania, they were non-existent. There was a couple brew pubs towards Philly, nothing down that way. Jersey had nothing. New York had a couple things. Mad FX up in upstate New York. Brooklyn Brewery, but very few and far between stuff like that. So it was really just exploring without a roadmap, for the lack of a better term. Like I said, the internet existed, but it was in infancy at that point. The biggest kind of the biggest publications at the time, was a Beer Enthusiast magazine, Michael Jackson, obviously, with his stuff. But that was, again, feeding us a lot of the same information that we didn't know everything about, but a lot of English and European-based breweries. But at this time, me and my friends were kind of just starting to figure out the United States and what the United States had to offer. And it went on like that for a bit. My buddy Wade moved away. He moved to New Jersey, so I was kind of not on my own. But, kind of had friends who were in beer somewhere, just kind of bopping back and forth and trying to find different things, and got really into a super duper rut with beer. And really just kind of put the pause button on things. I liked what I liked, and I was cool with that. It was a lot of old guard stuff outside of all the stuff that I've mentioned now, which is a lot of the Trappist breweries and like English barley wines. It was a lot of mainstays, Spot and Optimator, drink stuff like that, drink a lot of Brooklyn stuff, even like back then I think we were getting a decent amount of like Atwater and a lot of Trogsy stuff, Troganator and things like that, a lot of Pennsylvania based stuff, some Victory in there, you're throwing some Golden Monkeys, but you're also talking about, what's that beer that they make? Not Dirt Wolf. Their stout, Storm King, stuff like that. It was starting to kind of dive into breweries that were kind of regional, but in the kind of styles that I was kind of into, and that's kind of, starting to trudge through your mid-aughts. You're starting to talk about 4, 5, 6, 7. And then once you start to get later in the aughts, then you start to have these breweries, and my timing could be off on some of these, so if I'm wrong, shoot me. But then we start to have this kind of second coming of breweries, at least available to me, in northeastern Pennsylvania at the time. For me, at the time, I'm working locally, hyper locally. I'm drinking, what I can get by me. And then the doors start to open a little bit more. You start to have breweries that start to open up that are kind of super new school. Alchemist starts to open up. You have The Brewery, which was a big influence early on. Even like, Fat Tire, not Fat Tire, the brewery that makes Fat Tire, New Belgium. And all those breweries, that second kind of level, Avery. What else? I'm trying to think of all the breweries that really kind of came down like really aggressive in that second wave of breweries. And you know what I'm talking about, that level of brewery, whether it be the Schlafly's of the world, the Boulevards of the world, those kind of breweries. Not only they existed previous of my exposure to them, but those beers started to leak into my radar, for the lack of a better term. So then I started getting exposed to these like breweries that are not just doing their imitations of what I drank previously, which was, again, the English stuff and the Belgian stuff, but started to bring a little bit more of their kind of speed to things. That's when I really started to get a little bit more into Saison, a little bit more into kind of sour beer and lambic, and Wild Fern beer around that time. Not that it didn't exist. Like I said, I'll try to find that menu and post it from Suds. And from there, I had, back then, even in the late 90s, I was drinking Fantôme and Cantillons, things like that. But it was very few and far between. Now you start to have the Boulevard and Tank 7s of the world come in. Omegang is starting to branch out. You start getting the Hennepins of the world. And a lot of these different beers that started to pique my interest because, one, I didn't have the regular exposure to them until the middle to late 2000s, but also didn't have the volume, because you have one every now and then, but it wasn't enough to kind of really kind of train your palate, I guess would be the best way to put it, into kind of enjoying them, because it would be like you'd have them and it'd almost be like a goof, like a thing you'd have and be like, oh, that was fun, and kind of move on. But then you started to kind of open up and you started to get more into that world. Lighter beers, your Belgian singles, started to get not just here, but get here fresher, so they're quite a bit tastier. You start to have all these kind of saisons, not so much mixed ferm, but saison and farmhouse ale start to kind of eke in to my universe and start drinking and enjoying those. So when that started happening, I almost started to kind of re-emerge from my hermit stage. Like I said, I kind of pushed the pause button on what I was drinking. I was drinking old guard stuff. I had my kind of tentpole stuff, the Hardy's of the world. These are the best things. This is what I'm drinking. And really started to kind of be like, okay, there's cool stuff out there now, like more than what I'm used to. So I think I need to not be a hermit. It also coincided with me actually getting a divorce and being like, okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to sit in my house, do nothing, and drink awesome beer. Well, why don't I go out in the world and drink awesome beer? And started to kind of venture back out and try to find new and cool stuff. And by that time, and you're talking again, I'm kind of fast forwarding because there was a period of time where I wasn't really going out and about all that much. You're starting to get into the 2010s. And shit started changing rapidly right around 2010. That's when you started to have these new school breweries start to pop up, but not just them start to pop up, but beer culture started to take hold, to where people weren't just venturing into beer as a goof. Bottle shops started opening, really actual bottle shops started opening, to where there was like not just one or two in a city of this, like, oh, that place is weird, they got weird beer, like places that are like, I'm opening up, I'm getting crazy stuff kind of bottle shops, and just start really going for having really cool, different kind of stock of stuff, not necessarily just having, the victories out. They go out and about and do a little bootlegging, start going up north and go to your Lawsons of the world, go to your Alchemists of the world, and start to bring back these kind of beers. You're like, oh, this stuff kind of exists. Start getting West Coast beer on the fresh, which was probably the biggest kind of shift, is that now you started to get, when we had that kind of Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, when we had those kind of tentpole beers from out west, and they were now 1, 2, maybe 3 months old, your Green Flashes of the world, those kind of beers, and now you're getting them 1 to 3 months old, and you're drinking and go, oh, okay, now I actually know what I'm drinking. Now I actually know why people actually enjoy these beers and why they're so good. At first, you just couldn't understand. Well, now you know, as that stuff is old. And even back then, like I said, when you're like, this stuff isn't that good, you weren't really even putting the whole kind of hop, okay, time ruins hops and heat and all that stuff. We knew all that, but it wasn't like a general knowledge thing to where like, okay, this is good. It's only 6 months old. It should be good. Oh no, you have to not only have, time on your side, but you also have the supply chain on your side when you're dealing with these small West Coast kind of IPAs. And you started getting them fresher and you started to realize, oh wow, okay, there is this cool world of IPA. It took me that long to really get into it. I also do think there was an evolution of IPA making, and more specifically hop creation. The old school hops are quite tasty and I enjoy the crap out of them. Don't get me wrong. But the emergence of the manipulation of hops to make bigger, more vibrant, more flavorful hops, taking that skill set from the marijuana, from the weed world of crossbreeding and strain creation and creating these new and bigger and bolder and fantastical hops. You're talking at the beginning of the story, Citra didn't exist. You know what I mean? Mosaic, Simcoe. These are just weird things that are really not something in use, let alone in the lexicon of beer, and actually have them come to a head. Kind of just started. Everything started to just get exponentially more intense in the beer world. It was like going from exploring and finding beer in the late 90s, kind of refining and dialing in what I thought my perfect beer was, my favorite flavor profiles, and really zeroing in on those. And that, again, Belgians, English beers, barley wine, English barley wine, and kind of sitting on that for several years, starting to kind of get more into new flavors, more into sour beer, more into saison, more into farmhouse style ales, starting to get fresher, the way it should be drank kind of IPAs, having the new school New England style IPAs start to exist, start to filter down into my area. One of the lucky things about being here in a New England area-ish, northeast United States, is that those beers started to trickle down. They weren't distributed down here, but you would get them. A friend would go get one, or someone would send somebody a pre-real beer mill existence. Everything started to go crazy. It just, started to meet people who were into beer. I started going to beer shares. I started going to beer meetups. I started to hang out in bottle shops and meet new people and be like, you're into beer? You're into beer? Let's hang out. It used to be you meet one person into beer the whole year. You'd be like, that's insane, to the point where now you could meet somebody into beer every week if you were going out and about and learning things. And you're like, this whole culture exists. From that period of 2005 to 2015, we're jumping ahead a little bit here. It's insane. The exponential growth, both personally myself and kind of beers that I was into, to the beer world as a whole. Breweries started to explode. We had a brewery open up not too far away from where I lived in Wilkes-Barre. Breaker Brewing, they still exist now, and they were, I remember having beers from them that were brewing out of their garage, and then they opened, and then you had breweries in the Allentown area open, and then you had breweries kind of in and around the areas, out into more specifically like Pennsylvania was the big one. It took a while for the other states to kind of catch up, but it seems like Pennsylvania kind of grew, and all of a sudden you started to have New York kind of take off, then you have Jersey kind of take off, and you have all these breweries starting to open, and it's just, everything gets crazy. It just starts being this whirlwind of new beer, and even the stuff from Europe and around that region, from Spain and Italy, you start getting bombarded with these breweries that are coming in now. So it's like, you get into this kind of cool little subculture of beer, and in a very, very small period of time, let's say we take the year 2000 as a jumping off point. The way the world of beer existed when I got into it in the late 90s, or 2000 as a jumping off point, to 2010 is insanity. Like, it's insane in that period of time where things were at the beginning and where things were when we got to the year 2010, and it was just intense. It still kind of is. It exponentially gets crazier and crazier every year with styles and stuff like that. So, and it really did kind of help me in a more social kind of, I don't know, social aspect. I had my cliquey group of friends. We did music. I did a lot of music back then too, so it wasn't just all beer. But a lot of it was just music for music's sake and partying for partying's sake, and beer was kind of a cool kind of like pull me out of my shell kind of device that let me kind of meet people that I wouldn't normally meet because they just didn't make music that I was making. Like, I was very music centric back then. Still am now, but just starting to meet random different people. And the cool thing about beer versus music, and I think this really does still apply to today, is that, and I could be wrong because I've been out of, like, really seriously out of music for a while now, but like when I would do music stuff with my friends, we would create music or we'd buy records and do DJ stuff. And while we would find new artists and even stumble onto new genres to a certain extent within the style of music that we worked with. It was very much like, listen to this thing, it's awesome. And it was awesome, but it was also very similar to the other things that we always found as awesome. That's the hole that I was in when I was like kind of not really going out and drinking the old guard stuff. I liked what I liked. I liked, the things that I liked, and I tried to find things that I liked. I would try to find new stuff, but it had to be the stuff that I already liked. With beer, especially when you start to talk about the late aughts and the early teens, meeting people that were into beer, I think brought a really cool kind of interjection of newness, because it would be such a different thing. You'd meet somebody and be like, oh, you got to try this from this brewery. And it would be a completely different beer in an almost completely different style, but it would be awesome. So it was like you're jumping out of that genre. It's almost like you were jumping from style, like complete genres of music within like music's music. Well, beer's beer. You go from weird little techno to hip hop to whatever. You know what I mean? Like whatever. That would be like the jump. So I was staying within that bubble of music to where it was like, okay, it's beer, but this is a completely different experience for me. And it was just like that, like just nonstop. And then it all kind of culminated till, the YouTubes. Honestly, it was me dancing around, meeting a bunch of different people, going to a bunch of different bottle shares, not really visiting a ton of breweries at that point. Like I would go to a brewery here and there if I was in the area. And this is probably, in 2011, 2012-ish. And then, and I started going to a specific set of shares with a specific set of people, and I met a specific set of people. Person. It kind of got me thinking about YouTube. Not that I didn't watch YouTube videos about beer before, but I never really thought about doing YouTube. 2014, I think, is when I started. So you're probably talking about 2012, 2013. And I was like, you know what? I think I should do YouTube beer videos. I'm like, this guy I met does them. And if he does them, then I should do them. That was my mindset. We'll leave it at that. Listen, that's the end of this musing. So we jumped a lot of time here. So the first one was like 1997, 98 to like 2000, 2001. Right now we went from like 2000 to like 2012. So we jumped a big bit in there, but that has more to do with my kind of beer hermity-ness than anything else. So yeah. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. That's this edition. I'm not sure what time frame we're at here for this video, but that'll be this musings. I'm not sure what we're going to call this one. The first one was Matt gets into beer. Maybe Matt gets too comfy and then becomes uncomfortable. That's what it is. You want to be in slightly outside your comfort zone. That's where fun things happen. So yeah, it was a super cool, like super cool, super weird, super boring, but also super learned time. Like that period of time where I really just kind of paused and drank what I wanted to drink and really just didn't really explore all that much. I actually appreciate that time. I really enjoy that time. One of my favorite things to tell people to do is to stop the try to find a new thing kind of thing. Stop the ticking. Pick one beer you like, one or two beers you like, maybe drink that. Only that beer or that style for a month or two. Grab a case of pale ale, grab a case of lager, and just drink that. Step off the want for something new for a while, and there's a really cool journey to be had there. And I kind of feel like that's what I did. Several years, mind you, but it was really just deep diving into Belgians and deep diving into English ales and barley wines, and I absolutely love them to this day. I think I'll always love them. But it was a cool kind of base and a foundation to make. And then once I jumped into that kind of exponential growth of all these new different breweries and styles and things and places to go, you have that kind of base. I think it helps. A lot of people do the crash course in the beer, and they go from I like beer to 2 years later be like, I'm in 19 Razzle groups and I trade whales with this person. I'm missing that kind of core base. I think does some people a disservice, for the lack of a better term. So yeah, we jumped into beer. We made our base. All the base are below us. Then we start to think about doing YouTubes. We'll cover that next massive beer musings. So let me know about your kind of tweener period with beer. Everybody has them, I think. You know, you get into beer and then you kind of get into something that maybe, you know, style. Maybe it was for you, it was new school hazies and you're a hazy person. Maybe you're still in that. Talk to me about it. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you went through in that journey in your life. Let me know what you want to know about this period. If I missed something, if I said something and didn't expand on it, let me know. I will try to cover that in the next one. And next time we'll kind of talk about getting into YouTube, my kind of journey about initially getting into YouTube, because the YouTube period starts now and ends to where I am today, and that's going to be a couple different one of these episodes. So, yeah, there you go. Little massive beer musings in a book yet again. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think. Like I said, any questions, pop them down there, and hopefully you guys are enjoying a good beer right now. An old beer. I'm drinking a little bit of old Dunkelweiss right now, so go back to your roots every now and then. Hopefully you're doing all kinds of other fun stuff. Hope to see you next time. Cheers.